Hi, this is Davidian Lion, and I'm here to discuss mental authority. Having mental authority, which is also described as none or no inner authority, means that you have no definition or no defined centers below the throat. That means that either your ajna center is connected to your head, or it's connected to your throat, or both. This is a very rare authority. You're a projector, and really potentially the wisest of projectors, because you can see how every frequency of energy works because nothing is defined below the throat, and therefore there's no one center that is your inner authority. Instead, you're keenly aware of your environment and all of the energies that you're pulling into your undefined centers. Environment is humongous for you. All of that sensory data that you're receiving is informing you whether you're in the right place. And if so, the people you encounter, the opportunities that arise, the interactions, the exchanges will be beneficial. And if the environment is not correct for you, the opposite outcome. So if the environment you're in leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth, get out of Dodge. Because you really are tasting your environment like an energy stew. Your first question when pondering something big, a job with a new company, moving to a different state or town, or into a particular house or a room in that house, should be, is this environment correct for me? Of course, it's important to actually ask yourself this question when you're physically visiting the environment in question so you can experience how that, whatever it is, feels in your body. Just know that your mind will never skip a chance to regain the reins of your decision-making process and have its way. There's no definition in your body you can rely on as you're consistently absorbing the qualities of other people's defined centers and amplifying them. So you can get really wise about the energies that are emerging around you, but in the early phase of your experiment, before there's mastery, it can be really difficult getting used to the sensory overload. It's helpful to monitor your body, to become acquainted with the energies of all of your undefined centers. It's good to have people you trust who will listen without giving you advice, which allows you the opportunity to hear yourself when you speak. They should know that you're not seeking opinions. For this process, you'll want people who won't try to put their trip on you. They are simply there to help you hear yourself. It's best not to discuss a decision, but rather your ruminations about a decision before you've settled on a course of action while you're vacillating. Talk things over to hear what feels true for you or sounds true for you. Both you and your listeners are listening to the frequency of your voice and listening for fluctuations in your life force. When you speak, they can listen for fixed frequency. They might say, that sounds basically true. Does that sound or feel true to you? Instead of, that's not true, or that's true. They're not there to give definitive answers, just assist you in your process. When mental projectors respect their decision-making process, they can be deep wells of wisdom for others. When they don't, they can be deeply disturbed by the lack of stability and security with all of their undefined centers. You'll really start to hear a quality difference in your own voice. From when something is true for you, to when you're spouting BS and falsehoods, to when you should just probably stop talking. Looking at your open centers below your throat, we can see what you're not here to do. Starting with your undefined ego, you're not here to prove yourself. You're perfect the way you are, as long as you're operating correctly by following your strategy and authority. With your undefined G, you're not here to be boxed into one way of being, one personality or set of behaviors. You're here to explore many personas, careers, or vocations. With your undefined spleen, you're not here to be spontaneous and jump into things. With your undefined solar plexus, you're not here to be pressured emotionally or into making emotional choices. With your undefined sacral, you're not here to work a 9-to-5 job or be part of the workforce. You're here to be a specialist or a consultant of sorts and make more money working fewer hours. And with your undefined root, you're not here to work or live your life under pressure. Pressure is not good for you. So I can tell you right now, avoid a high pressure environment because it's not healthy for you. So when you know what you're not, which are your undefined centers, meaning what you're experiencing is not consistent because it's largely dependent on who's in your field, either those in your vicinity or those whose influential energies you haven't deconditioned from yet, whose energy you're still carrying around. Having this awareness that this is how you're designed, always with a straw in your mouth and so open, allowing all these energies to flood in, that awareness can really help you solidify in your body. Do you have a baseline sense of who you are at your core physicality? Just whatever that means to you. I'm not talking about your sense of purpose or your identity or your personality, but some other baseline of how you feel energetically, frequency-wise, in your body. When you're away from other people's influence for an extended period of time. Have you experienced that before, being on your own long enough to feel into what it feels like? So you have a good sense of yourself, by yourself, so that you can better sense when these center energies are being altered and or augmented by the other's energy. Your increasing awareness of this being your way and how you're wired can make it easier for you to detect when you're being influenced. Emphasis on easier time, not easy time. When you're not self, the wind of conditioning moves you. Meaning when you let your conditioned, undefined centers supersede following your strategy and honoring your authority. Your mind gets its voice from your undefined centers. So when your mind is particularly harsh, pay attention. Check inward. Notice, is that someone else's stuff coming through? Probably. So don't take things personally right away. Give it a ponder and then recenter. Don't be tied to some bullshit story that your mind weaves. Just see it. See the mind's robbery of your good time. Transmute it and then travel lighter again. When you're solidly in your body and anchored to your inner authority, you're not moved or thrown off by the conditioning. You simply taste it. And it becomes more about your ability to assess the other based on the energy you're absorbing than how it moves you off path, off your own ideal trajectory. And don't assume you know the whole story. Particularly if you don't have a totally open center pulling in this information, because that's the only time that you're gonna take in the other completely without any of your gates augmenting that frequency, which does give you a particular lens that you're looking at this energy through. It's not a true read. You know what I mean? It's not 100%. It could be very close, but it's probably not going to be spot on because, again, you're perceiving through your gates that are no longer dormant. And it's an amplification, the magnification of what you're reading. So it might even be cartoonishly emphasized in your body. You know what I mean? Rather than the exact frequency that the other person is putting out there. So you're seeing it in a more obvious way, like, oh, an extreme, so you can really sense, because it's really heightened, the qualities of the beings around you. Just possibly not at the extreme that you're receiving. Maybe a more tampered down version of the amplification that's going on in your body. So you need to figure that into the equation. Just don't get ahead of yourself thinking, based on what you sense, that other person's story. Or, oh yeah, it's also clear to me what's going on in the other person. Well, yes, more than others do, certainly. But, again, take into consideration, it's an amplification. Take into consideration, if it's not an open center, then you're not getting the unadulterated frequency that they're putting out there. You're augmenting that frequency through your gates, which are adding a different lens or a different flavoring to the frequency. So again, you do have to take these things into consideration. I mean, this is really a mindfulness practice, human design, in a lot of ways, having to do with the quality of your consciousness. So the point is to become mindful of when these energies begin to influence you in these where somebody who, it's generally much easier to recognize this happening when you have fewer undefined centers, or at least you'll generally have an easier time recognizing when a particular center is being influenced. The more undefined or open centers you have, the more challenging it can be to parse out where exactly you're being conditioned. As a mental projector, you have all these different access points, receptors, that are pulling in various energies, and you're sorting through an energy stream that may be difficult to process and probably has taken you quite some time to remain stable in the middle of so much energy that may have been destabilizing when you were younger and had less self-knowledge, which, on bad days can probably be somewhat crazy making. And on better days, I don't know, sometimes it might be annoying. Sometimes you don't want to have to feel other people's stuff. I mean, if they're in a good place, that's probably nice. But otherwise, if you're not in a mood to help someone work through their stuff, presuming, of course, that you were even invited to do that, that's 6 to 7 different centers of information. That's a lot of information to parse out and separate, but that's why you have the potential to be the wisest of the projectors. But that level of mastery requires a stair climb. And it's going to be less of a thing when you're around other people who are just as open as you are. And that might be very calming to be around these people because you sort of don't influence each other. You get to enjoy each other. It's peaceful. It doesn't push on you or create agita, as my grandmother would say. Different areas that I mentioned. Just be sure to honor your process, namely your strategy and authority, as your way of staying on path and on point. Bring your awareness to the fact that this is your dynamic, this is how it works for you. So you're not swayed, you're not moved in a direction you don't want to go in. That's not correct for you. You're not taking inappropriate actions or making incorrect decisions based on what your mind tells you to do when it's speaking to you loudly because of the energies that are flooding inside your body. You're going to want to spam filter a lot of that stuff anyway. Well, this is a point of mastery. Once you're used to this being the dynamic, that's basically lasted your whole life so far. So many of you, even without human design, have come to grips with that. But human design lets you be intimate with that process in a whole new way, bringing a whole new level of understanding to what that is that you're going through during those times of having these deep empathic experiences, being sensitive to the world around you nearly to the highest order. Very close to a reflector in your receptivity, in your openness. Now, with everything I just said, there are also dormant aspects of both your personality and your unconscious that become activated by the right people. And sometimes those are aspects of your genius, which only some people get to experience. And some of these aspects are quite major aspects of your life, including your purpose, what grounds you, and so on, that require others to access. For instance, if your incarnation cross, which are these 4 gates that are circled above, you have the personality sun, the personality earth, the design sun, and the design earth, which are like 70% of your makeup. 70% of the neutrino feed that informed your crystals. So it's really not about avoiding people conditioning you. It's about the right people conditioning you. And that is determined by several things. Your strategy and authority, because that's ensuring you're on the correct trajectory and engaging with the right people, situations, experiences, and invitations. But even quicker than that is recognizing when you're in the right environment or not. If not, scram, because you're not absorbing the good stuff, quite the opposite. And that can destabilize you and have you going off your path and into the weeds chasing squirrels. So if you're overwhelmed by all of this, start with paying attention to your environment, your home, your office, your hotel room, restaurants, any place. If it feels off, leave. If it feels good, pay attention to that. You may find some good people and opportunities there, and since you're also a projector by default having this authority, you can get good at seeing who is inviting you to be you, who really sees you, gets you, and accepts you for you. And are the invitations you're receiving correct for you? Well, not for instance if you're being emotionally pressured or if you feel like you're being forced to prove yourself, as I discussed a minute ago, because really, based on your defined centers, your invitation should really be related to those. So either expressing what you know, if you have a defined throat and defined ajna, or considering some type of issue, dilemma, or quandary for someone else, if you have a defined head and defined ajna. So unless it's about something along those lines, the invitation is probably not correct because they're not truly recognizing you for you and what you bring to the table, and therefore it's not a true invitation. The more awareness you practice, the easier it gets in quickly seeing which invitations are and aren't correct for you. Concentrate on following your projector aura strategy. Do not initiate. First, wait to be recognized for what you bring to the table and invited to share your insights, your products, your programs. I know, not so simple leaving a house that doesn't feel right, or even an office if it's tied to your job. It's not easy to unravel that, but that may go far in helping to explain why you're experiencing suboptimal results in your life. If you haven't already, watch the Human Design Projector Basics video, or watch it again for more information on how to make sure that your invitations are correct for who you are. And if they're not, don't be afraid or neglect to say no, because you know the outcome will not be worth the trial you're putting yourself through or the bitterness that will follow. It just won't. And remember, don't offer or blurt your insight, because it will simply fall on deaf ears or be rejected, or the idea will be stolen, either by accident or on purpose. Painful lessons you have undoubtedly endured in your quest to be heard. This human design intel really is your map out of the bitterness maze. Now, projectors do need to talk to get stuff out and process, but that doesn't mean you should do anything with what you're talking about. My teacher jokingly said he calls that taking turns holding the bucket, because sometimes projectors just need to blah 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 to each other like throwing up. Sometimes you just need to blah blah blah, but just recognize that this isn't your truth or the wisdom you're here to deliver. But professionally, you have to be seen and respected for who you are first, before you act, or you'll never get to taste the sweet success you're designed for. Be patient with yourself, first and foremost. It's going to be a difficult ride purging yourself of the conditioning you've absorbed all these years, associating with what you aren't, simply because it spoke the loudest inside you. Experiment. See what happens when you follow your strategy and authority, and see what happens when you don't. What's your mind's track record in consistently leading you to good results? Thank you very much, and good luck with your experiment.